Welcome back to my Master Surveillant Mindset here on Northwest Digital News. Darin Fredrickson, Kevin Hunter, and Kyle Torgerson here on the broadcast. And we have a whole mix of things to share. But Darin, let's start off with you giving a little recap. Over the last couple of weeks, you've been busy on some undercover missions. Tell us what you can about what's been making life busy and hectic for you over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, it's just been crazy. So, so last week, it's a group that we had gone out on about a month ago in Atlanta. It's a boyfriend-girlfriend team, a couple of heroin addicts that have a pretty extensive habit that need to support their habit. And they just decided the easiest way to do it is to go criminal, basically, and start defrauding businesses. And so we basically got a lot of intel. It was a recon mission a month ago, but also we were trying to get evidence. And the evidence we needed is basically evidence to put the misdemeanor crimes they're doing together to basically get the value at a felony threshold, which is only $500, which is you'd think pretty easy to do. So last week we went back out to Atlanta, me and my team, and we actually set up at the known address of the male suspect that we picked him up a month ago. And one of the team members was sitting in a parking lot, not even in the neighborhood of the guy, and the car drove right in front of him. And he's like, "Hey, we got the car over here." And what makes it really nice is people put stickers all over their cars, and they had some skull stickers on the back of this brand new 2019 vehicle. So the skull stickers basically just stood out. And so that's why when I teach surveillance, I tell investigators, don't put anything identifying on your vehicle, because people will key in and they'll, if you put something identifying, then it makes your vehicle unique. And so it worked out in our favor in this situation. We started following them, and boy, we followed them all day long. Watched them go to a few different businesses, commit some cash fraud. This couple was doing on average about $500 a day in cash, which is pretty significant. About a half of that went to drugs, and the other half went to food and gas, because they did a lot of driving and hotels.
Paying for that 2019 vehicle they were driving around.
Yeah, which ironically was registered to the girlfriend's mom, because the girlfriend, we later found out, was in violation of probation, and she was wanted by probation. So we followed them around till like 1 a.m. and it was a long day. And the surveillance went really well. We had 3 investigators, so never lost them for more than a couple minutes. But they started they started getting bounced by their drug dealer. And like I mentioned, they were on heroin. And so what happens on the street is you have a heroin dealer that needs to deliver drugs. And so as soon as they started parking at gas stations for extended period of times, at Family Dollars, Dollar Generals, I said, man, this is like my dope days. Like, they're waiting for dope. And this happened on the last trip too. And sure enough, after about 3 hours of bouncing from gas station to gas station and store to store, brand new BMW SUV slides in, and the male gets out, and you can see an obvious drug deal go down. And then they continued on. But so people always ask, well, why don't you just get them arrested for drug crimes, right? I mean, you're following them, you watch them buy drugs. It's pretty obvious what they're doing. And drug crimes just don't do it when you're dealing with professional fraudsters. It's just overall in the country, drug crimes have kind of taken a back seat. And if anything, they'll get probation. So yeah, we were out till 1 a.m. I went into this apartment complex about 12 midnight, and they backed in again. And I'm like, oh, like, do they live here? Are they shacking up with somebody here? What are they doing? And this was a bad apartment complex. As a matter of fact, my 2 partners drove in, and they're like, we're not staying in here, we're leaving. I mean, there was like a lot of people standing around, a lot of lookers, and it was obviously there was a lot of drug sales going on in there. But sure enough, this black BMW slides in there again, and they do a dope deal, and then our car leaves. So we put our car down at mom's house. They pulled into a garage, which is why we couldn't find the car before. And the next morning we go out there, set up, and same thing happened. I'm set up on the house, and all of a sudden one of my partners picks it up at a gas station about a mile away, just sees the car drive by in front of him. So went really well. And, you know, we had to get, like I mentioned, that video evidence to put him at a felony threshold. And so we were finally able to do that by using some hidden cameras. As a matter of fact, this little camera right here is my best friend. It's a GoPro Hero 4.
Yep.
And I conceal this in items, and I hit it on and drop it inside the businesses that they're frequenting, and I'm able to get some really, really good evidence. And I actually, on this camera right here, got 2 incidents of some thefts she was actually committing, which then she was turning into cash. And I can't mention how she's turning into cash. I can't mention how she's turning into cash because it's like a trademark secret thing, you know. This is an educational show for good people, not bad people. But,
there you go. There you go. Yeah. So, hey, real quickly then, this is like the funny thing that I think about all these kind of crooks who hang out together and are either committing fraud or, you know, just any kind of underhanded scheming that are going on. These are folks that not only can't, you know, somebody like you I trust, but they can't even trust each other. And it's kind of funny because it's like this association of people who are, you know, doing underhanded things. So they do underhanded things to each other as well. And I'm curious, like when it comes to the point where you finally bust them, how much of throwing each other under the bus do they do?
Oh boy. Yeah. So in this case, she had only been with this guy since January. As a matter of fact, in January is when she hit our team's radar, because like the theft went from like $150 a day to 500 plus. And we're like, whoa, let's like look at what's going on here. So she hooked up with this guy, and I talked to her first after she was arrested, and I said, you know, what kind of dope problem you got? Oh, I don't have no dope problem. I'm on probation. I drop UAs. And I'm like, oh, really? And you can tell she's lying. I mean, she got sores all over her face. And, you know, I said, well, what about the guy in the BMW? Oh, that's my friend, whatever. But she's like, I don't have the drug problem, but I'm not going to say who does, but because I don't get into their business. And obviously she's referring to this guy. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll go talk to him and see what he has to say. And so I go talk to him, and he's like, you know, I said, you got a dope problem? I don't. He goes, but I'm not going to mention who does. I go, well, she said you got the dope problem. And he goes, me? He's like, I'm the one doing all this for her. She's the one with the drug problem. And so they're throwing both each other under the bus entirely. And there's no loyalty among thieves. Like, it's all for yourself. Totally. As a matter of fact, it's kind of ironic. They actually, when we were doing surveillance on them, going up a freeway, we looked over and there was the detention center for this county, like the main detention center. And they kissed. You could see them in the front car, and I'm like, oh, they kissed. Oh, how romantic. They kissed right in front of the detention center. Well, flash forward 3 hours later, that's where they spent the night, was in that correction center.
Oh, so you know,
video.
Yeah, yeah, you know, so they had chosen their romantic location and then came later to stay the night there. So
it's kind of like foreshadowing in a book, and everybody kind of got a chuckle. It was actually at High Hope Lane. You know, you see all this. It's like at High Hope Lane, they kissed in front of the major detention center, which later I actually had to go get warrants on them. The officer said, hey, you know more about this couple than I do, so why don't you go down and get the warrants in front of the judge? And like, I had never done that. I've done hundreds of search warrants. I've gotten, you know, hundreds of warrants in front of judges, but that's when I was a sworn officer. And he just pretty much left. Like, he said, go get warrants. And I'm like where, how, when? So I went to the detention center. I'm here to get warrants on some people. And so I actually had to fill out forms. Got paid $20 per person. Fill out a form, which basically is like probable cause. And actually it doesn't even have a narrative section. It just says what charge, who the person is, dollar value. And then you go stand in front of a judge, get sworn in. And she said, so tell me what happened. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I said, well, historically, and she goes, I don't care about historically, tell me what happened today. And so I'm like, okay, told her what happened today, and she issued 2 warrants on these individuals. Just like that. And they got held on my word, apparently, which jurisdictions are different all over the country, but this was a new one to me to go get warrants. So knowing this in the future, I can kind of almost bypass law enforcement, which we had a little bit of a struggle with on this. We had a detective that was working the case with us, but he was in training all week, so we, had to rely on patrol officers when we got the evidence and called the police. But I'll just bypass law enforcement in the future and just go right straight to a judge and get a warrant, because the form basically said when, where, how, why, and that's it. I can get warrants myself. So wow. I learned something. It was pretty neat.
There you go. Hey, you mentioned something a bit ago about following these people around and putting these crimes together and developing the threshold for a warranty. And I want to get some feedback from you on a situation that actually took place over the weekend. It involved a number of police chiefs and the FOPs. Is that like Fraternal Order of Police?
That's correct.
Okay, so a number of the FOPs. These were not elected people who were doing all of this, but they're the organizers of all the unions and that sort of thing. But somewhere north of 24, maybe more, representatives from the various cities and police chiefs got together and put together a vote of no confidence, and it had a unanimous yes vote from, and they said they were representing roughly 12,000 officers, but a unanimous no confidence vote on Prosecutor Kim Foxx. And this followed the situation that happened with Jussie Smollett. But then they went on to elaborate on the problems that they're having with her. And they said this is a much bigger issue than just Jussie Smollett, that this is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, but this prosecutor has been letting felons off the hook for a long, long time. And they mentioned how difficult it was, how difficult she had made it to get felony charges against these criminals. And then the fact that once they had met the threshold, these people would go into court and she'd reduce the charges and let them off the hook anyway. And they made reference in this press conference to a recent situation in which one, possibly two police officers were shot and killed there. And this gentleman that was at the podium explains that both of these guys were in prison, were supposed to be in prison, but released back on the street by the prosecutor's office. So they're up in arms with Prosecutor Kim Foxx and asked for her to resign. I'm curious, in your professional experience as a police officer and things that how unusual is it for this many police officers to get together and give a vote of no confidence on a prosecutor like this?
Yeah, well, I've never even heard of a confidence vote on a prosecutor. Definitely with police chiefs, like Phoenix Police actually had one a couple chiefs ago where there was a real low confidence vote. But here's the thing: law enforcement goes out to do a job, but the prosecution is the one that actually files charges, and prosecutors' offices set policies. And even though, so you have laws on the book that say this, 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 but then when it actually gets to the prosecutor's office, they have internal policies where they're saying, well, you know what, we're going to have an internal policy where if it's this, we're really just going to do this. And so it kind of circumvents the intent of the law and the intent of the people when legislation is created. This is absolutely ridiculous. First of all, that case just blew my mind, and I'm thinking Chicago. Well, yeah, pretty much everybody in the country knows, Chicago is just corrupt with corruption. But like, this is a pretty national event, and to basically drop charges on a pretty clear-cut case where the co-conspirators even said, yeah, I was paid, we beat them up. It defies logic why they would drop charges like that. So as we go out and law enforcement and do our job, and I kind of made it my own little policy when I worked drug enforcement and all that, to not really follow up on the cases too much, because you would find out what they would do with them, plead them down, drop charges all the time, because it would just drive you nuts. You're doing your stage one, getting the bad guy off the street, but then the prosecutor's office, they are the ones that follow up and actually do the prosecution, and then you have obviously the detention where they go to prison or they go to jail. So a unanimous decision by multiple law enforcement organizations. You said it was like 12,000 strong. There's obviously an issue with that prosecutor, period. And it's pretty obvious when the charges were dropped on Smollett reference this incident. So I've never seen a unanimous 100% type vote like that, especially even on the prosecution. Amazing.
So what's coming up next? Obviously, a month, little less than a month or so from now, we'll be seeing your smiley face here in the Longview, Washington area. But what's between now over the next 3 weeks? What's kind of on the schedule for Darin Fredrickson? Where do you go next?
Well, we got about 3 weeks, so I'm thinking about doing a close to home type trip, probably West Coast, San Diego area. Not make it a vacation, but definitely. There's a guy that I've been watching, and I've gone on quite a few times. I think I've gone on him 5 or 6 times, but he's extremely transient, and he's over $100,000 in fraud, and I think I might pay a little attention to that. But here's the thing, I do a lot of contract work, and all of a sudden I'll get a call tomorrow morning and say, hey, we need you to do this over here. Can you do it? And like all my plans pretty much get set aside, which last week I was supposed to be, actually 2 weeks ago, I was supposed to be in Texas for a week. And I said, no, that's like, I can't do Texas right after, I think it was right after Atlanta the first time. So, sometimes you got to put the brakes on all the travel and say, I need to recover. So this week I'm actually just cleaning up my mess from last week and get that all caught up. And then we look at what's next. So I'm looking forward to come up to Longview though, and do some face-to-face, and really looking forward to that.
All right. Well, good times are ahead. Darin Fredrickson, Kevin Hunter, and Kyle Torgerson here on Master Surveillant Mindset on Northwest Asia News. Thanks, everybody, who joined us here on the broadcast. Till next time, take care.
This concludes today's live programming on Northwest Digital News. Thanks for joining us for this special broadcast. Heard around the world in more than 70 countries on YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, Facebook, and Twitch TV. If you enjoyed a story or guest we had here on Northwest Digital News and would like to strut your stuff on the broadcast, email us today at wainfo2017@gmail.com or call or text to 360-545-3501. We're always interested in unique stories, topics, and guests to share with our worldwide audience. Before you go, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up and comment on the live stream. And for those of you who'd like to financially support the broadcast, you can do so at patreon.com/Northwest Digital News. We thank you for your patronage. On behalf of Chris Bornstead, Kyle Torgerson, Stephanie Hunter, and all the people that made this broadcast possible, I'm Kevin Hunter. Till next time, take care.